According to the analytics and according to my AI model, it is alt season, but just because alts are outperforming doesn't mean that you can just blindly throw darts into the market and make money in the market. That time may come in the future. But in today's video, I wanted to reverse engineer things and really establish why we're in an altcoin season, what is triggering this, and then once we have that information, we can actually build out our game plans to profit from this environment. So in today's video, I'm going to run you through the reasons why we are currently seeing altcoin outperformance, where I think this goes in the future, and my exact playbook to actually outperform the market. And towards the end of the video, I'm going to be going through some exact altcoins which I think are going to outperform the market, both by design in terms of the way their tokenomics and narratives are constructed, and in terms of outperformance versus Ethereum and Bitcoin, because it's very important in this market. You're actually in the coins which are showing a propensity to outperform Ethereum. Otherwise, you could basically just position in Ethereum, right, and end up outperforming in the market. So if you do want to smash it this alt season or for the remainder of this bull run, because there will also be periods where alts cool down and then go crazy again, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And I hope you do enjoy this video because I think you guys will find a lot of value here, especially if you're invested in altcoins, which I assume most of you are. Now, it's funny because if you actually go to the altcoin season index that most people refer to, technically it's saying that we're not in altcoin season. It's saying that we're only at a 49 out of 100. But the reason why this is such a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator, is because altcoin season, by definition, according to this website, actually takes the 3-month or 90-day average of top 50 altcoin outperformance versus Bitcoin. If you actually go onto the monthly time frame, and I used my AI to look at which altcoins were outperforming Bitcoin, you can actually see that closer to 70% of alts are outperforming instead of the 49% that represents over a 90-day basis. So if you actually look at the market in the past month, it's much closer to altcoin season, if not pretty much in altcoin season or in the pre-altcoin season phase, as opposed to just having come out of the Bitcoin season phase into the middle of the range. So as you can see over the past 30 days, many coins like XLM have outperformed, ENA's outperformed. We made this custom dashboard on Claude, which is very, very cool. You can see HBAR has outperformed. This is taking the altcoin performance versus Bitcoin. Most of the top 50, 70% of the top 50 has actually ended up outperforming 35 out of 50 coins. And I think it's very important that you realize this and are actually aware of what's happening, because I think a lot of people, they're waiting for this altcoin season index to like reach this bubble territory, this 75 plus territory, to start thinking about positioning. Whereas we've actually been seeing the signs over the past few weeks, and I've been making content on this, but I'm making a final video again today to make you guys aware of this, because the market is having a slow week. So this is the perfect time to get up to speed, that we actually are in quite a risk on altcoin environment right now. And if you can actually play this next period in the market correctly, I think there are massive gains on the table, and I'll explain why now. You can see Bitcoin dominance has finally had its first break through the Money-Noodle. You can also use the 100-day MA for this on the weekly. This is the first time that it's actually broken below since November 2024. We all remember what happened back in November 2024. The market was going insane. Altcoins were flying left, right, and center. We had the biggest meme season in crypto history. And we didn't end up having a full breakdown. It ended up being a fake out before we ended up going higher on Bitcoin dominance, and the reversal was quite quick. Looking at Bitcoin dominance now, you can see that we have also broken down on the weekly chart. We are starting to see a slight impulse upwards, which could end up being a bearish retest, which could take dominance even further to the downside. But since we're doing it from a much higher point, in my opinion, what this means is that there's actually more headroom to the downside. So if we went from the current level on the Bitcoin dominance chart to the prior level that dominance was at in November, that would be a 10% drawdown. Now, do I think this is probable? I actually think it is. And here's why. Ethereum has one of the strongest narratives that it's had in quite some time. It's seeing record bidding through the ETH ETFs. It's seeing legislation, which is extremely positive for the DeFi environment, the stablecoin environment, and thus Ethereum. And we're seeing more institutional interest in Ethereum than ever. and ETH still hasn't reached its all-time high. So the fact that ETH is obviously part of the Bitcoin Dominance Index, and it's one of the main reasons why dominance has been coming down, because it's actually been outperforming Bitcoin over the last few days. If you do hold the belief that ETH is going to outperform, and I'll show you some compelling evidence very shortly, according to my AI model, that it actually is going to outperform Bitcoin, then you can assume that that will probably give the altcoin market enough firepower to see dominance actually come down towards this point. Because in November, ETH wasn't that strong. It actually didn't reclaim its 2021 all-time high. Bitcoin is already a 2x above its 2021 all-time high. So as ETH pushes towards highs, that should give the dominance chart enough steam to the downside to actually keep continuing. Now, you might ask, why is this actually valuable? Because, if ETH is actually triggering a dominance breakdown, why is this valuable? Does that mean we should just long ETH? Well, maybe for the first period in the cycle, yes, because Ethereum tends to lead before money flows into large cap alts and into small cap alts. However, I think there's something quite powerful here. And it's the fact that as dominance comes down and as Ethereum outperforms, people take on more and more and more risk as the cycle goes on. And the reason they do this is because it starts to build this belief in alt season. So once dominance starts breaking down even more aggressively, it kind of acts as a snowball, because people are trying to position in altcoins to actually catch up on the gains that they've missed out on in this initial leg of the run. And it's that flywheel, that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, which often drives these rotations down from Bitcoin to Ethereum to large caps and eventually to alts. And I pointed this out on the last show that I did on, the broader altcoin season topic a few days ago. And I basically said, look, we don't even really need alts to outperform that much. All we need is a retest or a lower high of the altcoin downtrend. You can see this is the others chart, which is the total crypto market cap excluding the top 10 to Bitcoin. So essentially altcoins charted against Bitcoin. We don't even need a crazy breakout, right? We don't need this to make a lot of money in alts, because in November, just this very small leg to make a lower high into resistance triggered 10, 20, 30, 40, 50x's across the market. So all we need is continuation of this trend, this reversal trend to take us to this level, potentially testing the November zone again, and then we can get rejected here and it could all be over. But just in this retest or this fake out here before we come back down, even if this is all that culminates from alt season, if you actually do the math, considering off the lows we're up 24%, that would be an additional 72% to the upside. So that would be 3x the move versus what we have currently done to get to that point. And if many alts are already up 100% off their floors in the past few weeks, just from that 25% reversal, imagine what would happen with an additional 70%. Things would go absolutely mental. So I think it's very important to understand that, I know I'm seeing a lot of people out there, talking about 2021 levels or Bitcoin dominance hitting 50% or, these targets. You have to understand that we don't even need that to make a lot of money in the market. All you really need is just a lower high on the others BTC chart, or even just a retest of that November low on Bitcoin dominance to make a lot of money in alts. Because every time you have a leg like this, there are huge gainers across the market. And we have seen this if you want to go back to the dashboard that I created. Multiple coins. ENA was actually one that I had quite a good trade, and I swapped my pump for ENA. I spoke about that last Sunday. This was a 74% gainer. And that has happened in an environment where we've just seen a little bit of a down leg on dominance. So every single time you get another down leg, you'll have these big gainers in the market. And even if we did, let's say, go up a little bit and then come eventually down to this level, even on the way back up for dominance to reestablish itself at the end of the cycle, even these little down legs can be opportunities to make money, opportunity to make money, opportunity to make money. So although the overall trend for dominance will be going up, there will still be these periods where risk on comes back and you have big opportunities to make money in the market. You don't need a lot in the altcoin market to make a lot of money. And that's what I'm trying to make people understand. Now, the good sign is for ETH BTC is that I think, and Cowan also has been saying this recently, that it's actually bottomed for the cycle versus Bitcoin. So I've actually mapped out the range for Ethereum versus Bitcoin, and you could see you have range low here, we actually bounced off it. This is the same zone that we bounced off in December 2019. You have mid-range here, which I think is the next logical shelling point for ETH BTC, by the way. And then if we're really lucky, we could potentially go to range high on ETH BTC, and this would mean ETH actually catching up with Bitcoin and getting up to speed with Bitcoin. All we need, in my opinion, is for ETH to go back to mid-range for fireworks to happen on alts, because that would be another 60% relative to Bitcoin. And in my opinion, given the fact that ETH has really just been ranging on the macro time frame against Bitcoin since 2019, even if it just went back up to mid-range, I think there would be absolute fireworks in the market. You can see we're ranging here, come here, range here. If we're lucky, this is actually a big macro range where ETH BTC pings like this. I know that's another scenario that Cowan brought up. Like, do you understand that if ETH actually went up 164% versus Bitcoin, how crazy the altcoin market would get? It would be absolutely insane, because ETH is the leader of the alts, and this whole speculation on large caps and alt season and lower cap alts are triggered by Ethereum actually outperforming Bitcoin. And this is something I spoke about in my last AI video, that the big periods of altcoin outperformance in the market are triggered by ETH. And I'll further show you that you don't need much of a move in the market to actually make money in altcoins. I mean, this is all that's happened on ETH BTC, right? It's a very small reversal, and this is all that's happened on others, right? Like, it's a very, very small reversal versus Bitcoin, but when sentiment improves, this opens up so many money-making opportunities, because even during this period in the Discord, for example, we've had multiple trades over the past couple of weeks, which have done 2x multiples in super short periods of time. For example, I did this post on the 17th of July, a week ago, saying that I met with the block team. I was really impressed, and I was looking to buy a bag over the next few days. I accumulated, and it went up 180%. Since the time of that Discord post. It actually went down slightly, enabling people to get a better entry before it went up 179%. Or Annie, for example, this is another one that when I saw it dipping on the launch of Valentine, I said that I'm adding more Annie, and I thought it could go back down to that key support level. And from the time of that post to the local high, that was another 190%. Or Black, for example, a new launch by Elio. I posted this, said that I was accumulating in the Discord, and then this went up 87%. It's actually up 100% now. So these are just examples of, this is nothing. These are just very small plays that in the Discord, right? Compared to November, they're nothing, but just a very small run in the market already enabled some of these trades to already start happening, and are enabling, not just for me, but also for Paradise and his trading style to start becoming extremely profitable in this market. You can see he's had a bunch of massive trades over the past few days, and even recently on the show, actually, we talked about SAHARA having a reversal. This is a new launch, and this absolutely ripped today and exploded from the point of entry that we discussed to its current level. This is up 60% in a matter of 2 days. So needless to say, if you have the right information in this market, if you're focused on the right coins, and I'll talk about in a minute what those coins are going forward, you can make insane amounts of money in the market in a very small amount of time. And if this is our sample size for what happens when ETH outperforms Bitcoin, imagine once we actually do get to the mid-range here, or imagine once we actually do get to this orange line here on others, things will just get even crazier and crazier and crazier. So if you do want to come on this journey and really, really, really maximize this alt season, if you haven't maximized alt seasons before and you want to actually do it this time, I highly recommend checking out the Mars High Club, link in the description below. That's where I post all of my earliest alpha. We have an amazing team of 6 analysts who are all day posting charts, all day posting setups. There's actually a new contributor called Dude. He's been in the Discord for a while, but he's been posting all of his trades like a madman, pretty much every 30 minutes, all day. So there's a continuous flow of trade setups and trade ideas to keep you more than occupied and actually outperforming in this market. So come and join MHC if you are serious about smashing this next period in the market. Now, I wanted to continue to, anchor this altcoin thesis by actually talking about Ethereum and where we currently sit in this rotation, because the interesting thing is, even though we might be in a technical alt season on the 30-day time frame, we actually haven't seen this aggressive rotation into small caps yet. And the reason for this is the fact that we are still just now seeing Ethereum start to outperform Bitcoin. But I have reason to believe that this rotation here from Bitcoin to Ethereum could actually last even longer than people think, which is good, because that could potentially extend the cycle just a little bit further. And that's because there's just a massive discrepancy versus Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the reason why I think there's a strong likelihood Ethereum continues to outperform Bitcoin is because there are a lot of fund managers, even a lot of retail who bought the Bitcoin ETF, and just a lot of market participants who feel like they've missed Bitcoin because it's run so much, but are basically using Ethereum as a catch-up play. And as I established before, there are some strong narrative elements like legislation, stablecoin growth, regulation that are actually helping the Ethereum narrative right now, and that is being exemplified via the ETF inflows. But something very interesting to look at, just to get a context of how big this ETH versus Bitcoin catch-up trade could get, is by looking at the discrepancy between the bear market lows and the all-time highs of Bitcoin versus Ethereum. For example, Bitcoin, from its bear market low, is up 663%. So massive multiples there on Bitcoin. ETH, from its bear market low, is only up 317%. This is a much smaller percentage gain. It's actually half the performance of Bitcoin, which, explains why ETH BTC had been bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. Even more interesting, from the 2021 all-time highs, Bitcoin is now sitting 71.5% above that level. ETH, relative to the 2021 all-time high, is only sitting, in fact, down 24.8%. So if you want to look at, since 2021, the outperformance of Bitcoin, it's plus 71% versus ETH minus 24%. That's a 100% spread. That means Bitcoin has performed exponentially better than Ethereum. So I think a lot of people in the market are now starting to realize that even after this big rally from ETH over the past few weeks, there is still a big catch-up trade in the discrepancy between Bitcoin and ETH. And look, maybe ETH won't get to where Bitcoin is, on a relative basis. Maybe it won't get to 2x its all-time high like Bitcoin is almost. And what would that put it at? Like $8,000 to $9,000. Maybe it'll stop at $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 because Bitcoin obviously has a much stronger narrative than Ethereum, given what's happening in the world and given the adoption that it's seeing. But I don't think it's unreasonable to assume let's be conservative, a 50% discrepancy could still exist, and this ETH relativity versus the 2021 all-time high could at least reach parity and go slightly beyond. And that's not assuming that Bitcoin actually continues to rally, which it probably will. Like, what'll probably happen is dominance will probably spike up at some point again before going on another leg to the downside. And it could go down first and then spike up, or it could go up first and then spike down. It could happen in either order, but I do think that Bitcoin has more upside this cycle. I spoke about in one of my recent videos where we ran an analysis that I thought Bitcoin could hit 140 to 150K, and Claude actually gave it over a 50% probability of hitting 200K by next year. So, at some point between Q4 and halfway through next year. So Bitcoin probably has more gas in the tank, and that means that if Bitcoin reprices higher, ETH, in terms of a relative valuation versus Bitcoin, should also theoretically reprice higher. And it's kind of the lifting tide rising all ships. Altcoins off the back of Ethereum's outperformance should reprice higher. So you could theoretically see others BTC come up and then stall out and chop sideways for a little bit, right? Whilst altcoins go up, just because Bitcoin's pumping, whilst altcoins are also moving. So even with alts chopping sideways versus Bitcoin or versus Ethereum, alts could still be going up a lot. Bitcoin might just be, absolutely ripping and sucking some of the liquidity out of the market, which isn't a bad thing because that probably leads to a more explosive phase later. So that is a good thing for the market. And what I actually did is I went on to O3, which is where I was doing my analysis and running my models here for Ethereum versus Bitcoin outperformance. And I asked it, from now on until the end of the cycle, what probabilities would you assign ETH to outperforming Bitcoin? And it said there was a 60% chance ETH would outperform Bitcoin by more than 10% based on these factors. And it said that there's only a 25% chance that Bitcoin continues to outperform ETH. So of course, nothing is absolute in crypto, but you have to look at the balance of probabilities, and the probabilities are suggesting here, according to O3, that you'll either see Bitcoin and ETH stay roughly the same, or ETH actually outperform with a 60% probability. And this does align also with the chart, where the range lows also suggest that ETH probably should see a continued response here. Even if we do see periods where, it comes back down, this should keep making higher lows and move up at least to the mid-range. And then if we're lucky, range high. But, I don't want to get too greedy and ask for range highs because that would be absolutely crazy for the market. So my opinion on all of this before we get into my playbook here and look at some, altcoin plays is I do think that there is more juice left in this cycle. And I think we are late stage in terms of the overall cycle if you want to take the FTX lows and you count that as the start of the cycle. But we are early, relatively early, in terms of this final altcoin run. Because for ETH to get back to the mid-range, and even for others, BTC to move up to that previous November level or at least closer towards it, what would a realistic time frame look like? Probably something like that. That would be a pretty quick move, right? We could actually come up, go down, come up like this. That's actually taking us into like Q2 of 2026. So, I mean, it could also just go up like this. That takes us to Q4. But then even from here, you would probably see some sort of reaction and then a second push up, which could take us into early next year. And it's only July. So we're talking maybe 6 months here, just based on what a realistic time frame could look like from a chart perspective. And if you take the timeline from the bottom zone of the November pump to the top, that was 50 days. And then to the secondary top, it was technically a lower high. That was 77 days. So that was 2 months. So that would at least take us into roughly September to October. And that would just be to get to this resistance zone, right? So any move beyond that would probably add another 1 to 2 months onto things. So that's why I say from the perspective of an altcoin season, given the fact that we aren't even on a 3-month basis averaging altcoin season territory yet, it's only just triggered on the 1 month index, high likelihood, in my opinion, that this actually extends a little bit longer, which makes us early in the altcoin season, but late in terms of the overall cycle, if that makes sense. Which, honestly, if you're just coming back into crypto now, is not a totally bad thing, because it's been very difficult to hold altcoins in anticipation of the cycle. For example, a lot of the altcoins that you could have longed in 2023, some of them are actually lower than they were then, even though the overall market is up, just purely based on the fact the narratives and the rotations keep changing in the market. So this leads me on to my playbook to actually make sure you're in the right altcoins to capitalize on altcoin season. And in my opinion, that playbook is continuing to long altcoins that are outperforming and are strong, and continuing to fade laggards in the market. Let me take you all the way back to 2021. The coins that kept outperforming were Luna, Phantom, Solana, and AVAX. They were the narratives from the very beginning of the run, like in December, Jan, as things started to wake up in the beginning of 2021, all the way to the end of November, which was the peak, and then into 2022, even with Luna and Phantom. Those were the strongest narratives. Any dip on AVAX, Luna, Phantom, Solana, they were buys until the end of the trend. So if you want to say that right now, we're also in the December-esque period, November to December-esque period of 2020, before that January to February period, or even if you want to assume we're in the mid-year lull, if you want to make comparisons in that June period before the blow-off top in November, in both of those periods, the best coins to long were the L1s and the L1 narrative. And the worst coins to long were the weak coins from 2017 that were just failing to run. Even XRP didn't do that well last cycle, but a lot of people were longing, things like EOS, things like Monero. They did okay, but they didn't do nearly as well as the new guard. So I think it's very important to actually understand what the narratives are in this current moment in time. And there are a few. I think the Ethereum narrative will keep doing well. So some of the ETH betas, you can look into things like ENA, you can look into things like Eigen, you can look into ETHFi. I think these will do well. I think memes are going to have a comeback. They keep doing really well. Some of the strongest memes like Pengu look really good. Mew looks good now. Popcat looks good again. These are types of plays. They're obviously Solana betas, but if you think Solana will do well, like I do, they become good beta plays. Brett, if you want a beta play for base, a little bit of alpha is actually looking at running a barbell strategy of having an L1 that you think will do well, and then having the top meme coin on the chain to actually capture some of the community and hype exposure to that chain. So running a barbell like that. I think another narrative that's really strong are reflexive coins. I'm going to get into this in a future video, but looking at coins which have an innate flywheel to outperform. So Athena, for example, has a positive flywheel because it does well in high funding environments. Meme coins have a positive flywheel because as community talks about a token, it generates more retail interest. That generates more buy pressure, which generates more community members, which generates, more buy pressure. So they have a positive flywheel. certain tokens in the market have a positive flywheel. So I'd be looking at reflexive coins, the top ecosystems, Sol, ETH, Sui. I would be looking at the top meme coins in the market. And obviously on this channel, I'm going to bring you lots of altcoins, but those are some of the places that I would be looking. And the other really important thing is that you actually establish that your altcoins, if you're going to long any coin in the market, are actually outperforming Ethereum. So we're in this stage in the market because Ethereum is going to be the leader, in my opinion, for the next period of time, if our analysis is correct here, and AI also backs up that analysis. If ETH BTC really is going to continue pushing forward, at least into the mid-range, then you want to make sure from an opportunity cost perspective, you're actually in altcoins that are outperforming Ethereum. So if you want to outperform Ethereum, why chart on the USD pair? I mean, I understand charting on the USD pair to get, rough entry zones and TP levels and invalidation levels, but if you actually want to outperform, you should get into the habit of charting on the ETH pair. So when I'm looking at an entry for Solana, instead of thinking, I'm going to enter Solana at 190 on a dip, I'm thinking, no, I want to enter Solana on a dip as long as it's holding above the key pivot point on the Ethereum chart, which right now is the 0.058 level. Or looking at Pengu, which is a really strong meme that I think should be considered if you want meme exposure to the market. I think it's a 2.5 bill. Doge last cycle peaked at 60 bill. So we know how crazy these memes can run. Looking at the ETH USD chart and saying, look, it's into resistance now. It's the same launch day resistance that it had. However, if it does break above and starts to hold above on the first or the second dip, this is where I look at building a position, because now it's in price discovery versus Ethereum, and I want to be in an alt that's outperforming ETH. Or even if you want to move down the time frame, you could go into the 4 hour and say, okay, any major dip I'm going to long as long as the uptrend with higher highs and higher lows is intact versus Ethereum, because I actually want to outperform ETH. It's the same concept for longing ETH versus Bitcoin, like looking at ETH BTC. Like, why on the 4 hour, or even we can go into the daily, why would you have been longing ETH, right, for this entire period? Because all it was doing was making lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, and lower lows. So why would you long? Whereas now that we've actually had a reversal and we've actually cleared some of the prior lower highs, now we're in a new paradigm where this has shifted from a downtrend to an uptrend, and we can keep looking to long Ethereum versus Bitcoin on the drawdowns. It's the exact same logic for charting altcoins against Ethereum. You want to make sure they're actually in uptrends versus ETH. If we actually invert one of the charts here, like Pengu, and I like using inverted charts because this gives me an idea to kind of remove some of my bias in the market. This is a very risky, you could argue it's at support, it might have a bounce here, but this is a very risky trade if you invert the chart, because it's making lower lows and lower highs. So if an altcoin chart looks like this, and is actually bleeding versus ETH, you don't want to take this bet. You want to wait for the altcoin to actually start to reclaim key levels, and then on a new uptrend, look at getting in on the drawdowns versus the ETH chart. So I think getting into the habit of actually charting versus Ethereum is going to be very important at this stage in the cycle where we are looking at a big rotation into Ethereum. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, overall, this is the playbook. Keep longing the outperformers. So look at the top performers in the market from a narrative point of view and from a relative strength point of view. Long them on pullbacks. Fade the laggards. Don't try and catch knives. Don't try and play catch-up plays, because they'll often keep underperforming. Be in the strongest coins in the market. Consolidate your portfolio down to a strong basket of coins. Continue to add on pullbacks until there is a market structure shift. And what I mean by market structure shift is a breakdown on Bitcoin, like a real high time frame breakdown on Bitcoin, which we haven't had yet. Right now, we're actually just chopping in a range. So if you want my Bitcoin analysis, we're basically just in a range, right? Until we break either extremity, I wouldn't be playing it too much, just intra-range trading for now. But unless there's a big breakdown on Bitcoin on the daily or weekly, we're still above the daily 200 MA. Money-Noodle, that's pretty fine. On Ethereum, it's the same. ETH BTC looks intact. Unless these things start breaking down, you continue to assume that things will keep moving higher and you play the overall trend. The trend is your friend until the end of the trend. That obviously means at the end, you're going to lose some money. But the idea is that you make enough money along the way to the upside that by the time you round trip a little bit of your profits, it doesn't matter so much. For example, your portfolio goes from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 to 60K. Maybe you don't cash out 60, but at 45, you end up making a major de-risk on confirmation that we are entering a bear market. So, okay, you might not actually capture the last 15K, but you already captured 5K or 10K to 45. That's basically how I personally trade the market. I'm not looking at capturing the Pico bottom or the Pico top. My goal is to capture the meat of the move. And as long as I capture the meat of the move, I'm confident to make money. My last bit of alpha, so we've gone over tracking ETH BTC pairs. We've gone into being in the strong narrative. ETH pairs versus altcoins. We've gone into look at the strong narratives. We've talked about reflexive coins. We've talked about longing strong coins and fading laggards. The last topic I want to bring to your attention, because it has been extremely profitable, as you can see on SAHARA. This just keeps pumping, by the way. I made you guys aware of this pretty early, and we actually talked about the Fractal on the show. The next thing you got to be aware of is new launches, because in this environment, a lot of the new shiny coins, they're actually doing quite well. And this Fractal, I really want you to kind of embed this in your mind, because this also happened on Black, which was one of the reasons why I took a strong Black trade. You see this pump, dump, consolidation, pump. And on SAHARA, pump, dump, consolidation, pump. This is your airdrop / new launch Fractal. I want you to keep your eye on the new launches. As long as they have strong fundamentals and big exchange listings, you should chart them and look for potential entries based on technicals. A lot of these new launches actually respect trend quite well, because there's a lot of people watching the same levels. I'm going to keep you up to date with some of the new launches that are launching in the market. There are a couple to keep your eye on that are around today. I'm not saying ape in on launch. I'm saying play the Fractal and also use relative valuations versus competitors in the market to work out where there's an opportunity. So use technicals and fundamentals. But two are firstly Rainmaker. This is launching very, very soon. This is an AI protocol which is focused on data training for AI video. You'll actually be able to train the AI using your mobile app to earn tokens, which I think is very, very cool. I know the team well. They've been building for a long time. I'm an early investor. So this is one that I've got my eye on. Could be a good AI play to watch. Then the other one that I'm watching, which actually just launched today, is Multibank. This is quite interesting. I spoke about this on the live stream. They're the world's largest derivatives broker. So if you trade derivatives, you would know about them. They've done 35 billion in volume, but they're entering crypto for the first time. So an example of a real product with product market fit entering the crypto market for the first time. And they've committed to, I think, over 400 million in buybacks and burns over 4 years. I believe they launched at like an 800 bill FDV, but the market cap is a bit lower. Keep your eye on this token as well, because it's not really crypto centric. So a lot of crypto natives aren't really aware of the narrative, but PMF is a very important thing in the market. And if that does become undervalued, or if we do see a sell-off over the coming weeks, I think that could be an opportunity as well, obviously, as long as the technicals respond. But both of these have strong fundamentals, in my opinion. And so did SAHARA. That's why SAHARA was on my new launch watch list. And that's why Black as well from Elio was on my new launch watch list. Guys, these new launches, they really, really can do well if you play them in the correct way. Like Black was an amazing trade. SAHARA has been an amazing trade. These ones I'll keep my eye on. Not every single new launch absolutely, kills it. Some have to go through quite a painful period of going down. Pump is an example of that, right? Pump is also going down for a variety of factors. But I also think this one could, Pump's not really following the new it is actually in a way, but it's on a higher time frame. So the new launch Fractal can also play out like this. You see, price finding a floor, and then eventually it ranges. And then once it breaks out of the range, it can recover quite aggressively. I'm not saying that'll happen exactly on Pump, because some tokens never find a range. That's why the onus is on you to actually see if the price action is respecting a level. For example, if we drew it like this, and we noticed that it was actually adhering to this range low like this and building nicely, and there was strong demand, and it starts to make higher lows, and then there was this level here. This for me would have been a long trigger, because it's actually respecting trend, just like it was on SAHARA and Black. Whereas if it just keeps going lower and lower and lower and never makes a range, you don't enter, right? You only want to enter strength in the market. So strength can be represented in a couple of ways: higher lows, higher highs, key levels actually being respected, so range lows / support being respected, and breakouts above resistance zones with volume. These are all indicators that I use to work out whether a coin is strong or not. So the new launches, keep your eye on them. I have a channel in my Discord called Interesting Projects where I post some of the new launches I'm keeping my eye on. I'm personally invested in these, so I have a vested interest, but sometimes I'll just drop stuff that I'm interested in here. If it's an upcoming TGE that I'm looking at pretty much all major TGEs because I want to track them. I've got a new launch folder in my trading view, but the ones with strong fundamentals obviously stand out because even if I don't nail my execution on launch day, at least strong fundamentals should theoretically give me a better risk-adjusted profile on a potential trade there. So that's my analysis of where we sit currently with alt season and my playbook with alts, but in future videos, I'll go into specific alts in more depth. Just today, I wanted to give you a more broad overview of the market. If you do want to absolutely crush it for this next period in the market, make sure you join the Mars High Club. Link in the description below, where we've built the best community in crypto, and you'll get the absolute earliest alpha there. And I will see you tomorrow as usual. I'm actually doing a show with Paradise. We're going to be going over some of the top setups, and I'll probably also have a solo show later that day. So we're going ham on the content because now's the time where you really, really need to lock in. If you're enjoying Euro Summer, at least make sure you're carving out a few hours a day for some laptop time, because now is the time to be focusing with so much opportunity in the market, especially as you see these dips. Like the market's a bit slower now, but got a little tip on the Money-Noodle, and you can use whatever momentum indicator you want, but I use the Money-Noodle from the Discord. Go into the 4 hour and track a lot of the retests, because you'll notice a lot of coins are adhering to bullish structure, and any dips are actually for buying along that noodle. So cool. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a lovely day. Peace out.